She is just a cleaner I married.
She's just a cleaner I married.
Dorian Blackwell said it softly, not loud enough for the dining room to hear, not sharp enough to sound cruel, but loud enough to destroy the one woman who had trusted him. Norah Bellamy stood near the hallway entrance, with a folded napkin in her hand. She had only stepped away from the dinner table for a moment, one small act of courtesy, one quiet attempt to return what someone had dropped. Instead, she found the truth waiting for her behind a half-open door. Verina Ashcroft stood close to Dorian, her silver dress catching the warm light from the townhouse walls. Her voice carried the confidence of a woman who believed she still owned a place in his heart. "Tell me the truth, Dorian," Verina said. "What is she to you?" For 1 second, Dorian said nothing. That silence should have protected Norah. That silence should have reminded him of the woman who had shared his home, guarded his dignity, and stood beside him when strangers looked at her like she did not belong. But pride answered before his heart did. "She is just a cleaner I married." Norah's fingers tightened around the napkin. Her face did not change. She did not gasp. She did not rush forward. She did not give Verina the pleasure of seeing her break. But inside her chest, something went still. Have you ever been reduced to one small word by someone you trusted? If you were Norah, would you walk away that same night? Comment what you would do, because this moment is where everything begins. Norah had heard insults before. She had heard guests call her girl without looking at her face. She had heard women ask if the sheets were clean, while standing in rooms she had spent an hour making spotless. She had heard men speak over her, around her, through her, as though her uniform had erased her name. But this was different. Those people had never promised to respect her. Dorian had. He had sat across from her months ago with a contract on the table and desperation hidden beneath his polished voice. He had told her this marriage would protect them both. He had promised privacy. He had promised dignity. He had promised she would never be treated like a mistake. Norah had believed the word respect because she needed to believe in something. Her mother was sick. The bills were rising. Her choices had narrowed until sacrifice looked like survival. So she accepted a marriage without love because she thought respect would be enough. Now Dorian's voice had taken even that from her. "She is just a cleaner I married." The sentence did not shout. That made it worse. It sounded casual, easy, like Norah was an item he had borrowed for a season, like her patience had no value, like her kindness had been convenient, not seen. Verina's lips curved with quiet satisfaction. That smile told Norah everything. Verina had asked the question to measure her place. Dorian had answered to protect his pride, and Norah had become the cost of his weakness. She looked down at the napkin in her hand. A tiny smear of sauce stained one corner. Such a small thing, such a normal thing. She had left the table to return it, because that was who she was. Even hurt, Norah noticed what needed care. But for the first time that night, she wondered who had cared for her. Norah was not the only one who heard him. At the far end of the hallway stood Isolde Blackwell. She had stepped away from the dinner table for a private call, but Verina's question stopped her. "What is she to you?" Then Dorian answered, "She is just a cleaner I married." Isolde stayed still. Her face did not show shock, but her eyes hardened. For years she had warned Dorian about pride. She had watched him charm investors while dismissing staff. She had seen him confuse status with worth. Now his words confirmed her fear. He had not become wiser. He had only learned how to look polished. Verina smiled, pleased by the answer. She moved closer to Dorian, thinking the old place beside him had opened again. Isolde looked at her son, then she looked toward the dining room, where Norah had quietly returned to her seat. That hurt Isolde more than the insult. Norah did not beg. She did not expose him. She carried pain with dignity. Isolde stepped forward. Dorian turned and froze. Verina's smile faded. Isolde stopped in front of them and spoke calmly. "Say it again." Dorian opened his mouth. No words came out. A moment ago, he had sounded certain. Now, with his mother standing in front of him, he looked like a boy caught breaking something he could never repair. "Mother," he said, "it was not meant that way." Isolde did not blink. Then say what you meant. The hallway went silent. Verina shifted beside him. For the first time that night, her confidence cracked. Dorian looked toward the dining room. Norah was already seated again. Her back was straight. Her hands rested in her lap. Her face showed nothing, but that silence carried more pain than tears. He knew she had heard. That knowledge hit harder than any accusation. Isolde followed his gaze. Then she turned back to him. You wanted control of this family's name, she said, but you still do not understand what makes a name worth carrying. Dorian lowered his eyes. Verina tried to speak, but Isolde raised one hand. No, not now. That was all it took. The hallway became still. For the first time, Dorian had no power in the room. Norah had not shouted. Isolde had not raised her voice, yet everything had changed. Norah sat at the table like nothing had happened. Crystal glasses reflected the warm light. Soft music played somewhere in the background. Conversations continued in low voices, careful and polite. But Norah heard none of it. Her mind stayed in the hallway. She is just a cleaner I married. The words repeated, not loud, not sharp, just steady. She kept her posture straight. She refused to give anyone a reason to look at her with pity. Across the table, a woman spoke about travel plans. Another laughed about a recent gala. Norah nodded when expected. Her movements calm, measured, controlled. No one at the table knew she had just been reduced to nothing. Or maybe they would soon. The hallway door opened. Dorian walked back in first. His face had lost its usual confidence. He did not look at Norah. That told her everything. Verina followed, slower this time. Her smile was smaller, uncertain. Then Isolde entered. The room shifted. People noticed. Silence spread from one end of the table to the other. Isolde did not return to her seat. She stood beside the table and lifted her glass slightly. Before dessert, she said, her voice steady, I would like to say something. Norah's fingers tightened under the table. This was the moment. Everything was about to change. Before we continue, tell me this. If you were Norah, would you stay and listen? Or walk out with your dignity intact? And if someone you loved spoke about you like that in private, would you ever trust them again? Norah Bellamy never entered the Blackwell Grand Hotel like the guests did. They walked through the front doors beneath gold lettering, rolling designer luggage behind them, greeted by doormen who remembered their names before they even reached the lobby. Norah came in through the staff entrance. Every morning, before the city fully woke, she passed through the narrow side door with her tote bag on one shoulder and her uniform folded neatly inside. She arrived early, not because anyone praised her for it, but because she believed work deserved care. Her locker was small. Her name tag was scratched at the corner. Her shoes were plain, chosen for long hours, not beauty. Still, Norah prepared herself with quiet pride. She pinned her hair. She pressed her uniform. She washed her hands, checked her schedule, and began, suite after suite, bed after bed, mirror after mirror. She cleaned rooms where guests left half-finished champagne beside handwritten complaints. She replaced towels thrown on marble floors. She picked up silk scarves, receipts, broken lipstick caps, and jewelry boxes left open like carelessness was a luxury. Most guests never saw her. Some saw her and looked away. A few spoke to her only when something displeased them. More towels. The room smells strange. Be careful with that. Norah answered with calm respect. Yes, ma'am. Of course, sir. I'll take care of it. But she never bowed inside herself. Her work was honest, and Norah knew honest work did not lower anyone. What lowered people was cruelty. What lowered people was the need to feel taller by stepping on someone else. So she cleaned with discipline. She checked corners others missed. She folded sheets with care. She left rooms better than she found them. Not for praise, for principle. By noon, her hands often ached. By evening, her feet felt heavy. Yet she still moved with grace through the service halls, holding herself like a woman who knew her worth even when the world forgot to notice. To the Blackwell family, she was easy to overlook. A cleaner, a uniform, a name on a staff list. But Norah was never small. They simply never looked long enough to see her. Norah had rules for herself. Never answer disrespect with disrespect. Never let exhaustion turn her careless. Never mistake silence for weakness. Those rules carried her through days that would have made other people bitter. When a guest snapped fingers at her from across a suite, Norah did not rush like a servant called by command. She walked over with calm steps and answered with a steady voice. When a manager blamed housekeeping for a mistake made by the front desk, Norah did not argue in the hallway. She wrote the truth in the report, signed her name, and returned to work. When Verina Ashcroft's friends visited the hotel and whispered about the staff girl with pretty eyes, Norah kept folding towels. She heard them. She simply refused to let their words own her. There was power in that, not loud power, not the kind that filled a room with money, perfume, and attention. Norah's power was quieter. It lived in the way she showed up every day without surrendering her self-respect. It lived in the way she corrected a crooked vase before leaving a room, even when no one would know. It lived in how she remembered guests who needed extra pillows, elderly visitors who needed help with luggage, and new staff members too nervous to ask questions. She did not perform kindness. She practiced it. Discipline shaped every part of her life. At home, she stretched her small income as far as it could go. She paid clinic bills before buying anything for herself. She cooked simple meals, washed her uniform at night, and set her alarm before lying down. Some nights, she stared at the ceiling and wondered how long she could keep going. Then morning came. Norah rose. Again, that was what people like Dorian never understood. The rich often called survival strength only after it looked beautiful. Norah knew the truth. Survival was not always beautiful. Sometimes it looked like tired eyes, sore hands, unpaid dreams, and a woman buttoning her uniform because someone she loved still needed medicine. But no matter how hard life pressed against her, Norah guarded one thing, her dignity, and that was the one thing no hotel guest, no manager, no Blackwell, and no careless insult could take without her permission. Norah's locker held more than her uniform. Behind neatly folded fabric, beneath a small pouch of coins and receipts, there was a thin notebook wrapped in brown paper. No one knew about it. No one had ever asked. But that notebook held the life Norah had not been able to live. During her short breaks, when the service corridor fell quiet, she would sit on a low stool, pull it out, and open it carefully. Page after page filled with pencil sketches, room layouts, chair designs, light placements, color notes written in small, precise handwriting. She did not draw randomly. She studied. She observed every suite she cleaned. The way sunlight hit the curtains in the morning, the way a poorly placed lamp made a room feel cold, the way expensive furniture still failed to make a space feel welcoming. She noticed what worked. She noticed what didn't. Then she improved it on paper. A lounge could feel warmer with softer lighting. A hallway could feel wider with better placement of mirrors. A bedroom could feel alive with the right textures, not just expensive ones. Norah understood something many designers missed. Luxury without warmth felt empty, and warmth could not be bought. It had to be created. Years ago, she had studied interior design. She had loved it. Every class, every assignment, every project had felt like a step towards something bigger. Then her father fell ill. Hospital visits replaced lectures. Bills replaced tuition. Dreams paused, then slowly faded under pressure. But Norah never threw them away. She carried them quietly. She kept learning without a classroom. She kept improving without a mentor. She kept drawing without an audience. To the hotel, she was a cleaner. To herself, she was still a designer. And that difference mattered, because one role paid her bills. The other kept her identity alive. Norah closed the notebook when footsteps echoed in the corridor. She slipped it back into her locker, locked it, and returned to work. No one saw the pages she had filled. No one saw the ideas she had built. But they were there, waiting, for a moment when the world would finally be forced to see what had always been hidden in plain sight. Norah did not learn dignity from books. She learned it from her mother. Long before hospital visits became routine, before bills stacked up on the kitchen table, her mother had shaped the way Norah saw herself and the world. "Work will never make you small," her mother used to say, while preparing simple meals in their narrow kitchen. "Only your choices can do that." Norah had not fully understood it as a child. Back then, she thought dignity came from success, from recognition, from a life where people noticed your worth without needing to be told. But life had taught her differently. Dignity was not given, it was protected. When her father fell ill, everything changed. Savings disappeared. Plans collapsed. Her mother took extra work without complaint. She stretched every coin, turned small meals into enough, and still found a way to sit with Norah at night and ask about her day. Never once did she speak with shame. Not about money, not about struggle, not about the life they had been forced to accept. Instead, she repeated one lesson again and again. Never let anyone make you feel less because of how you survive. That sentence stayed with Norah. It guided her when customers ignored her. It steadied her when coworkers felt defeated. It reminded her who she was when the world tried to reduce her to a job title. Even now, with her mother lying in a clinic bed, weaker than before, Norah carried that lesson into every room she cleaned. She did not rush her work out of fear. She did not lower her voice out of insecurity. She did not shrink to fit into other people's comfort. She stood, spoke, and worked like someone who knew her worth was not tied to anyone's opinion. Every payment Norah made toward the clinic bills came with quiet pride. Every long shift carried purpose. She was not trapped. She was choosing to endure for someone she loved. And that made all the difference. Because Norah was not working just to survive. She was working to protect something far more valuable, her dignity, the one thing her mother had given her that no one else could take. The guests rarely noticed Norah, but the staff did. In the quiet spaces behind the polished walls, where uniforms replaced designer clothes and long shifts replaced leisure, Norah was known, not for her job, for her character. In the laundry room, where steam filled the air and voices dropped to tired murmurs, Norah was the one who greeted everyone by name. In the service corridors, when new employees looked lost, she was the one who stopped and guided them without making them feel foolish. When someone forgot a task or made a mistake, Norah did not report them for attention. She corrected it quietly or helped them fix it before management noticed. That earned her something rare, respect without noise. An older housekeeper once said, "If Norah leaves this place, the work will still be done, but the peace will go with her." Norah had heard it. She had smiled. Then she went back to work. She never acted like she was above anyone, even when she knew more, even when she worked harder, even when she carried herself with more grace than people who looked down on her. That balance made people trust her. When someone's child was sick, Norah covered their shift without asking for anything in return. When a coworker cried in the break room after being insulted by a guest, Norah sat beside her and said, "Their words do not define your value." She did not speak often, but when she did, people listened. Even supervisors noticed. One manager once told another, "She runs her floor better than half the team leads." Yet no promotion came, no recognition, no spotlight, because Norah never pushed herself forward, and the system rarely rewarded people who worked quietly. Still, her presence changed the atmosphere around her. Where Norah worked, things felt calmer, more ordered, more human. People straightened up when she entered, not out of fear, but out of respect. She had influence without a title, authority without a position, and loyalty without asking for it. That kind of respect could not be bought. It had to be earned, and Norah had earned it, one quiet act at a time, in a world that barely noticed she was doing it. To the guests, Norah was part of the background, a uniform moving through rooms, a quiet presence that fixed problems before they were noticed, easy to ignore, easy to forget. That was how people like Dorian had seen her at first. A role, a convenience, someone who existed to keep things running without ever stepping into the spotlight. But what they failed to understand was this: invisibility can hide strength. Norah saw everything. She saw how guests treated people when they thought no one important was watching. She saw how wealth changed the way people spoke, moved, and valued others. She saw how often comfort made people careless, and she learned from it. She learned what kind of person she never wanted to become. She learned that kindness carried more weight than status. She learned that real presence did not need attention to exist. That knowledge gave her an edge. Few people noticed. While others chased validation, Norah built awareness. While others relied on titles, Norah relied on discipline. While others tried to be seen, Norah focused on becoming someone worth seeing. That difference made her powerful in ways that could not be measured on paper. Even in Dorian's penthouse, before everything fell apart, Norah had changed the space without asking permission. Fresh flowers placed near the window. Books arranged where they would be touched, not just displayed. Small details that made a cold room feel lived in. Dorian noticed the change before he understood the source. That was Norah. She influenced without forcing. She improved without announcing. She created impact without demanding credit. People overlooked her because she did not compete for attention. But the truth was simple. Norah did not need attention to matter. And the moment people were forced to truly see her, everything they believed about worth, class, and power would begin to shift. Because the woman they ignored had already become someone they could not replace. Dorian Blackwell grew up inside rooms where silence meant pressure. His childhood was not poor, but it was not soft. The Blackwell name had once been respected, until his father damaged it with debt, scandal, and careless decisions. After that, Isolde Blackwell carried the family on her back. Dorian watched his mother rebuild everything. He saw her wake before sunrise, take calls late at night, face men who expected her to fail, and leave every room with more power than she had entered with. People praised the Blackwell Grand Hotel now, but Dorian remembered the years when creditors called their home. He remembered his mother sitting at the dining table with papers spread before her, one hand pressed to her temple, the other gripping a pen. She never cried in front of him. That taught him strength, but it also taught him fear. Dorian learned early that failure had a cost. A missed opportunity could become public shame. A weak decision could stain the family name. A wrong partner could turn into a headline, so he trained himself to look perfect. Perfect grades, perfect manners, perfect suits, perfect answers. By the time he became a man, he had mastered the appearance of control. He knew how to shake hands, how to pause before speaking, how to smile for cameras, and how to make investors feel safe. But no one had taught him how to be humble. No one had taught him that reputation was not the same as character. Dorian became impressive before he became wise, and that was the beginning of his greatest flaw. Isolde Blackwell loved her son, but she never trusted him blindly. She had raised him with privilege, but she had also raised him under warning. "This name will open doors for you," she told him once, "but it will not make you worthy of entering them." Dorian heard her words. He repeated them when necessary, but Isolde could tell they had not settled in his heart. She expected him to lead one day, not because he was her son, but because she wanted him to earn the right. The Blackwell Grand Hotel was more than a business to her. It held the story of every worker who stayed late, every housekeeper who carried the floors, every cook, porter, clerk, guard, and manager who helped rebuild it. To Isolde, leadership meant responsibility. To Dorian, leadership often looked like inheritance. That difference troubled her. She watched him in meetings. He was sharp, confident, and persuasive. He remembered numbers. He handled pressure well. He knew how to present success in clean, polished language. But Isolde looked beyond performance. She noticed how quickly he lost patience with people he thought were beneath him. She noticed when he remembered the name of a major investor, but forgot the name of a staff member who had served him for years. That mattered to her. A man who ignored workers could not lead a hotel. A man who valued image over people would one day damage both. So Isolde delayed giving him full control. Dorian called it punishment. Isolde called it protection. She was not protecting the company from failure. She was protecting it from her son's pride. Dorian did not chase love the way ordinary men did. He chased approval. He liked rooms where people turned when he entered. He liked headlines that called him disciplined, refined, and destined for greatness. He liked women who looked like success beside him, women whose names sounded good in society pages. That was why Verina Ashcroft held his attention for so long. She was beautiful, in the way magazines liked, polished, connected, trained to smile at the right people and speak with the right tone. She knew which charities mattered, which designers impressed, which friendships opened doors. Standing beside her, Dorian looked complete. At least, that was what he told himself. But Verina did not calm him. She fed the part of him that needed applause. With her, every dinner became a display. Every party became a test. Every public moment became another chance to prove he belonged at the top. Dorian mistook that pressure for passion. He mistook admiration for loyalty. He mistook elegance for depth. Isolde saw through it. She knew Verina loved the Blackwell life more than she loved Dorian. She saw the way Verina's eyes moved toward cameras before they moved toward him. She saw how Verina praised him most when others listened. But Dorian defended her. He thought his mother disliked Verina because no woman would ever be good enough. He was wrong. Isolde disliked what Verina brought out in him. Around Verina, Dorian became colder, prouder, more concerned with how things looked than how they felt. And a man ruled by status will eventually sacrifice someone innocent to protect his image. Dorian's charm was hard to deny. He knew how to make a table listen. He spoke with ease, dressed with precision, and carried himself like certainty had been built into his bones. In public, he looked like the kind of man people wanted leading an empire. That was his advantage. It was also his danger, because charm helped him avoid correction. When he made mistakes, people softened them. When he hurt feelings, people called him busy. When he dismissed someone, people excused it as pressure. Money and good manners covered what humility should have fixed. Dorian learned how to impress people faster than he learned how to understand them. He could read a contract, but not always a heart. He could negotiate with investors, but fail to notice when someone near him was quietly wounded. He could speak about loyalty at a charity event, then overlook the people who showed loyalty every day without praise. That was shallow thinking, not lack of intelligence. Dorian was not foolish. He was worse than foolish in some ways. He was selective. He gave depth only to people he considered important. Everyone else received manners, not respect. That was why Norah confused him. She did not chase his attention. She did not flatter him. She did not treat his wealth like a crown. She moved through his life with steady dignity, and for a long time, he failed to understand what made her different. He thought quiet meant simple. He thought modest meant weak. He thought a woman without status would be easy to manage. That mistake would cost him more than he was prepared to lose. Isolde distrusted Dorian because she knew what he was capable of becoming. Not a cruel man by nature, something more dangerous. A careless man with power. She had seen it many times in wealthy families. Sons who inherited buildings they never built. Men who spoke of legacy while ignoring the people who protected it. Leaders who confused obedience with respect. She refused to let Dorian become one of them. That was why she blocked his engagement to Verina. That was why she questioned his decisions. That was why she watched how he treated people who had no title, no fortune, and no influence. Dorian thought his mother was controlling, but Isolde was testing his character. She wanted to know whether he could value a person without needing society to approve of them first. She wanted to know whether he could protect someone vulnerable or use them when pressure arrived. Deep down, she feared the answer, because Dorian cared too much about being admired, and admiration was easy to manipulate. A compliment from the wrong woman could soften his judgment. A public rumor could push him into panic. A threat to his image could make him forget his values. That weakness made him unsafe as a leader. It also made him unsafe as a husband. Isolde saw Norah before Dorian did. She saw the quiet strength, the discipline, the warmth, the kind of character money could never manufacture. But Dorian saw a solution, a cleaner with no scandal, a woman he thought would be grateful, a marriage he thought he could control. So when pressure came, he made the worst decision of his life. The pressure began inside a glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of the Blackwell corporate tower. Dorian sat at the head of the table, dressed like a man who had everything under control. His suit was perfect. His expression stayed calm. His hands rested still on the polished wood. But the room did not belong to him yet. Every person at the table knew it. The board had grown impatient. For months, Dorian had expected the next leadership transfer to move forward without resistance. He believed his record was enough. Revenue had risen. Hotel bookings looked strong. Investors liked him, but numbers were not the only concern. A rumor had spread through private circles. Dorian was preparing to reunite with Verina Ashcroft. To him, it sounded harmless. To the board, it sounded reckless. Verina had enemies in the industry. Her family carried old financial disputes. Her public image looked clean. But the people around the Blackwell empire knew how much damage a wrong marriage could cause. One board member leaned forward. "Your personal decisions affect this company, Mr. Blackwell." Dorian's jaw tightened. "My private life is not on the agenda." Another director answered, "When your private life threatens investor confidence, it becomes our concern." The words landed hard. Dorian looked toward Isolde, expecting support. She gave him none. She sat near the window, silent, watching him face the discomfort he had tried to outrun. For the first time, Dorian understood something. The board did not fully trust him. Worse, his mother had allowed them to say it in front of him. That wounded his pride more than he wanted anyone to see. He left the meeting with his name intact, but his power delayed. Outside the room, Isolde stopped beside him. "You want authority," she said. "Start by proving you understand responsibility." Dorian said nothing, but, inside him, anger had already begun searching for a shortcut. Later that evening, Dorian found Isolde in her private office at the hotel. The room was quiet, lined with old photographs of the Blackwell Grand before it became a landmark again. Isolde stood near the window, looking down at Manhattan, as if the city itself were another contract she had survived. Dorian entered without knocking. "You embarrassed me today," he said. Isolde turned slowly. "No, I allowed the truth to enter the room." His mouth tightened. "You let them question my judgment. They questioned it because you keep giving them reason." Dorian stepped closer. "This is about Verina. It is about you." That stopped him. Isolde moved to her desk, picked up a file, and placed it before him. Inside were reports, investor notes, social risk assessments, press clippings, and private concerns from senior advisors. Dorian scanned them quickly, his face growing colder with every page. "You had them watching me? I had them watching the risks around you. She is not a risk. Your need to defend her without thinking is the risk." Dorian closed the file. "What do you want from me?" Isolde held his gaze. "I want proof that you value character over image." He gave a bitter laugh. "How exactly do I prove that?" "By choosing a life that is not built for applause." Dorian looked away. Isolde continued, her tone firm. "Until I see maturity, the transfer stays suspended. No increased control. No final approval. No inheritance of power you have not earned." The words struck him harder than the board meeting. Dorian had expected pressure. He had not expected a wall. He left her office silent, but his mind raced. If his mother wanted proof, he would give her proof, not the kind she meant, the kind that looked right from the outside. That was Dorian's mistake. He thought character could be staged. Dorian spent the next few days studying his options like a business problem. He did not ask himself what was right. He asked himself what would work. Verina had become a liability. The board distrusted her. Isolde opposed her. Investors feared scandal. If he chose her openly, he would lose more time, more control, and more respect inside the company. So he needed a different image. Stable, humble, unexpected. A wife who would silence rumors without creating new ones. Someone clean in reputation, calm in manner, and distant from high society. Someone Isolde could not accuse of chasing his fortune. That was when Norah Bellamy entered his thoughts. He had seen her before, but he had never truly considered her. She worked in housekeeping. She moved quietly through the hotel. Staff respected her. Guests rarely complained about rooms she handled. Managers described her as reliable, discreet, and disciplined. To Dorian, those qualities became useful. He told himself the arrangement would help her too. Money for her mother, security, a better apartment, freedom from long shifts. He dressed the idea in practical language because it made the plan feel less selfish. But beneath every polished reason sat one truth. Dorian needed Norah because she made him look like a man who valued character. He did not yet value her character. He valued what her character could do for his image. That difference mattered. Still, he moved forward. He had his legal team draft a private agreement. 1 year, separate rooms, no public conflict, appearances when required, financial compensation, full medical support for her mother, a clean separation. When the year ended, everything neat, everything controlled. Dorian believed Norah would accept. He believed need would make the decision for her. That belief should have warned him about himself. But Dorian did not see arrogance when it wore the mask of strategy. He saw opportunity. Norah was called to the executive floor near the end of her shift. At first, she thought there had been a complaint. She checked her uniform, wiped her hands once on a clean cloth, and followed the assistant into Dorian's private office. The room smelled faintly of leather, coffee, and expensive wood. Dorian stood behind his desk, looking composed. "Norah Bellamy," he said. She nodded. "Mr. Blackwell, please sit." She remained standing. "If this is about suite 1804, the guest requested extra linens. I already sent them up." "It is not about linens." His voice softened, but not enough to feel warm. Norah waited. Dorian gestured toward the chair again. This time, she sat. He explained the situation in controlled pieces. The board pressure, his mother's condition, the public speculation, the need for stability. Norah listened without interrupting. At first, she thought she had misunderstood. By the time he placed the agreement on the desk, she knew she had not. "You want me to marry you," she said. "On paper." Her eyes stayed on his face. "For 1 year? Yes. With separate lives? Yes. And after that, we end it." "Cleanly," he said. Norah looked at the contract but did not touch it. Dorian continued. "Your mother's treatment would be covered in full. You would also receive enough to start again after the arrangement ends." Her breath caught at the mention of her mother. Dorian noticed. For the first time, his confidence seemed to soften. "I am not asking you to love me," he said. "I am asking for an agreement that helps both of us." Norah looked at him for a long moment. What about respect? The question surprised him. He answered too quickly. "You will have it." Norah did not smile. She had heard promises before. This one had a price attached. Norah carried the proposal home like a weight no one else could see. The contract stayed inside her tote bag, folded beneath her uniform. Every step from the subway to her apartment felt heavier than the last. Her home was small, but clean. A narrow table stood near the window. A kettle sat on the stove. Her mother's medication schedule was taped to the cabinet, with careful notes written in Norah's handwriting. That was the first thing she saw when she entered. Not the room, the medicine, the reminders, the proof that love had become a list of costs. Norah sat at the table and pulled out the agreement. The words looked cold. Marriage, duration, confidentiality, compensation, separation. She read every line, twice. Dorian had offered enough money to change everything. Her mother could receive better care. The overdue bills could be paid. Norah could return to design one day, or at least stop choosing between medicine and rent. But at what cost? A marriage without love was one thing. A marriage used as proof of someone else's character was another. Norah knew what people would say if they found out. Some would call her desperate. Some would call her lucky. Some would assume she had chased him. None of them would understand the quiet panic of watching someone you love get weaker while your paycheck stayed the same. She pressed her hands together and closed her eyes. Her mother's voice came back to her. "Never let anyone make you feel less because of how you survive." Norah wanted to say no. Her pride begged her to say no, but pride did not pay clinic bills. Pride did not buy medicine. Pride did not sit beside her mother during long nights and promise there would still be time. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, almost angry at herself. This was not a dream. This was a decision, and every choice had a cost. The next morning, Norah visited her mother before work. The clinic room was pale and quiet. Her mother slept lightly beneath a thin blanket, one hand resting near the edge of the bed. Norah sat beside her and held that hand between both of hers. For a while she said nothing. She studied the tired lines on her mother's face, the softness that illness had not taken, the strength that still lived there even in weakness. Her mother opened her eyes. "You look troubled," she whispered. Noor smiled faintly. "I'm thinking. That is never cheap with you." Noor gave a small laugh, but it faded quickly. She did not explain the full offer. Not yet. She only said, a chance had come. A difficult one. A difficult one. One that might help with treatment. Her mother watched her carefully. "Will it cost your self-respect?" Noor looked down. "That depends on how I carry it." Her mother squeezed her hand. "Then, carry it standing." Those words settled inside Noor. By noon, she returned to Dorian's office. This time, she did not look frightened. She looked clear. Dorian stood when she entered. "You have an answer?" Noor placed the agreement on his desk. "I have conditions." His brows lifted. She continued, "You will not speak to me like staff in private. You will not use my mother's illness against me. You will not ask me to pretend I am less than I am." Dorian studied her, surprised by the steel beneath her calm. "Agreed," he said. "And when this ends," Noor added, "I leave with my name intact." He nodded. Yes. Only then did she sign, not because she wanted his world, not because she wanted his money, because her mother needed time. Would you accept this deal if your family needed it? Tell me in the comments. Because Noor's yes was not weakness. It was sacrifice. And Dorian had no idea that the woman he thought he could manage would soon become the mirror he could not escape. Marriage changed Noor's address, but it did not change her place in Dorian's life. The penthouse was high above Manhattan, filled with glass, steel, quiet hallways, and furniture too perfect to feel welcoming. Everything looked expensive. Nothing felt warm. Dorian gave Noor the guest suite at the opposite end of the penthouse. "This will be yours," he said, opening the door. Noor stepped inside. The room was larger than her old apartment, with cream walls, a wide bed, and windows overlooking the city. There were fresh towels in the bathroom, folded robes in the closet, and a small writing desk near the window. It should have felt like comfort. Instead, it felt borrowed. Dorian stood behind her, hands in his pockets. "You'll have access to anything you need," he said. "My assistant will send your schedule for public appearances." Noor turned to him. "My schedule?" "For events, dinners, charity evenings, board-related appearances, nothing too demanding." His tone made it sound simple, like she had not just signed away 1 year of her life. Noor nodded once. "And outside those events, we live privately." She understood what he meant. Separate rooms, separate routines, separate hearts. They would be husband and wife in public, strangers behind closed doors. That first night, Dorian ate dinner in his study, while Noor sat alone at the kitchen island with a bowl of soup she had made herself. The city glittered beyond the windows, but the silence around her felt colder than the view. She looked down at her left hand. The ring was beautiful, too beautiful for what it represented. A promise no one had made with love. Dorian expected Noor to be easy. That was the part he never said aloud, but Noor felt it in every instruction. He expected her to attend events when told, smile when needed, stand beside him without drawing attention, answer questions with grace, but never too much honesty. He did not insult her directly. Dorian was too polished for that. His control came dressed as guidance. "My assistant will help you choose appropriate clothes. You do not need to speak during investor dinners unless someone speaks to you first. If anyone asks personal questions, keep your answers brief." Noor listened. Then she asked, "Do you want a wife or a shadow?" Dorian paused. The question annoyed him because it was fair. "I want this arrangement to work." "So do I," she said. "But I will not disappear to make you comfortable." His gaze sharpened. "I am trying to protect you from people who judge harshly." "No," Noor said calmly. "You are trying to protect yourself from what they might think of me." That silence between them carried more truth than he wanted. Dorian looked away first. Noor did not push further. She had no interest in winning arguments for sport, but she wanted him to understand one thing early. Need had brought her into this marriage. It would not make her obedient. Later that week, an assistant sent 3 dresses to Noor's room. Each one was expensive, pale, and chosen to make her blend in. Noor returned 2. She kept the navy one. Then she altered it herself. A softer neckline, better fit, small hand-stitched details at the sleeves. When Dorian saw her before the event, he stopped for half a second. "You changed the dress." "Yes." "Why?" Norah picked up her clutch. "Because I am the one wearing it." Norah did not rebel loudly. She did not slam doors. She did not turn every disagreement into a fight. Her resistance was quieter, which made it harder for Dorian to control. When he placed a black credit card on the counter and told her to use it for anything she needed, she left it there. The next morning, it was still untouched. Dorian noticed, "You did not take the card. I have what I need. That is not the point. It is to me." He studied her, confused. Most people in his world accepted gifts quickly and called them kindness. Norah treated money with caution, as if every offer carried a hidden chain. "It is part of the agreement," he said. "The agreement covers my mother's care. That is why I signed. And your comfort?" Norah met his eyes. "My comfort is not for sale." After that, he stopped pushing the card. But Norah's quiet resistance showed up in other ways. She learned the penthouse staff by name and thanked them directly. She made her own tea instead of ringing for service. She carried her own coat. She corrected Dorian when he spoke about workers as if they were numbers on a report. At first, he found it irritating. Then he found it difficult to ignore. One evening, he came home late and found Norah in the kitchen, helping the housekeeper wrap leftovers for her children. The housekeeper looked nervous when Dorian entered. Norah did not. She worked past her shift, Norah said. The food would have been thrown away. Dorian loosened his tie. "I did not object." "No," Norah replied. "But she expected you to." That answer stayed with him longer than he wanted to admit. The first real test came at a private lunch for hotel donors. Dorian had prepared Norah the way someone might prepare a guest for unfamiliar customs. Who to greet, who to avoid, what topics were safe, which people mattered most. Norah listened with patience until he said, "If you feel unsure, just smile." She looked at him. "I know how to speak." "I did not mean it that way." "You often don't." Dorian had no answer. At the lunch, Norah sat beside him beneath a chandelier that looked older than everyone's secrets. The room was full of smooth voices and sharper eyes. People smiled at her with curiosity, not warmth. One woman leaned across the table. "Mrs. Blackwell, this must be quite an adjustment for you." The pause after the sentence made its meaning clear. Dorian's hand tightened around his glass. Norah smiled. "Most changes are." "And were you familiar with this circle before your marriage?" "No," Norah said, "but I am familiar with people." A few guests glanced up. The woman's smile thinned. How useful. Norah picked up her water glass. "It is." "You learn a lot when people think your position makes you harmless." The table went quiet. Dorian looked at her. For the first time, he saw how steady she was under pressure. She had not raised her voice. She had not embarrassed anyone directly. Yet she had drawn a line so cleanly that no one knew how to cross it without exposing themselves. After lunch, Dorian walked beside her to the car. "That was risky," he said. Norah did not look at him. No, it was honest. The more Norah appeared beside Dorian, the more society tried to measure her. At charity dinners, women studied her clothes before her face. At hotel events, men asked what family she came from, then lost interest when her answer did not include old money. Some guests praised her in a way that still sounded like an insult. How refreshing. So grounded. Such a humble story. Norah learned to hear the meaning beneath the manners. They did not know where to place her, so they tried to lower her. Verina's friends were the worst. They moved in groups, glittering with diamonds and quiet cruelty. They never attacked Norah in a way that would look ugly from a distance. They used smiles, small laughs, questions sharpened at the edges. At one fundraiser, Norah stood near a display of auction pieces when two women approached. One touched the sleeve of Norah's dress without permission. "This is sweet," she said. Did someone choose it for you?" Norah stepped back, gently removing the woman's hand from the fabric. "I chose it." "Really?" The second woman said, "How brave." They laughed softly. Across the room, Dorian was speaking with a donor. He did not hear, nor did not search for him. She had no intention of needing rescue from women who mistook cruelty for class. Verina appeared behind them moments later, dressed in ivory, her smile calm and practiced. "Noor," she said, "you are adapting better than I expected." The words sounded pleasant. The insult sat underneath them. Noor turned. "Thank you." Verina's eyes moved over her dress. "I suppose confidence helps when one does not know the rules." Noor smiled lightly. "Rules are useful, but manners matter more." One of the women stopped laughing. Verina's expression cooled. For a brief second, Noor saw the truth. They hated her calm because it refused to give them power. The comment came later that same night. Noor was standing near the auction table when Verina's friend lifted a necklace from its velvet display and smiled. "Some women need diamonds to be noticed," she said, looking straight at Noor. "Others need a wedding ring." The group laughed. This time, Dorian heard. He turned from his conversation, his face tightening. But Noor answered before he reached them. "A person who needs a price tag to feel beautiful has my sympathy." The laughter stopped. Noor's voice stayed gentle. That made it worse for them. She had not shouted. She had not begged for respect. She had not even looked wounded. She had simply placed the truth on the table and let it sit there. Verina's friend flushed. Verina's jaw tightened. Dorian stopped a few steps away, watching Noor as if he had never fully seen her before. Noor turned toward the auction display and adjusted the necklace back into place with careful fingers. "It is a lovely piece," she added. "It deserves better conversation." No one answered. The women drifted away one by one, carrying their embarrassment behind stiff smiles. Dorian approached Noor. "You did not need to handle that alone." She looked at him. "I have handled worse alone." The sentence was quiet, but it struck him. For the first time, Dorian wondered how many battles Noor had fought in silence before she ever entered his life. He wanted to say something, an apology maybe, a defense, but the words felt too late and too small. Noor glanced toward the ballroom. "Your donors are waiting." Then she walked back into the crowd with her head high. Dorian stayed where he was. Behind him, people kept talking, drinking, laughing, but his attention remained on Noor. The woman he had expected to obey was teaching him, without asking, how dignity looked when it refused to bend. The penthouse had always looked perfect. That was the problem. Every surface shined, every chair matched, every wall displayed art chosen by someone paid to understand wealth, not comfort. The rooms were wide, clean, and silent, but they felt more like a showroom than a home. Dorian had never noticed. He slept there, changed there, took calls there, and left again. To him, the penthouse was proof of success. High above the city, private elevator, floor-to-ceiling windows, security at every level. But Noor noticed what it lacked the first week she arrived. No warmth, no softness, no trace of anyone being loved there. She did not ask permission to change it. She started small, a bowl of fresh oranges on the kitchen island, a folded throw over the stiff gray sofa. A lamp moved closer to the reading chair, so the corner no longer sat unused. She opened curtains in the morning and let light touch rooms that had been living in shadow by habit. Dorian noticed the changes in pieces. At first, he said nothing. Then, one evening, he stopped near the living room and looked around. "Did you move something?" Noor glanced up from the table. "Yes." "What?" "The room." He frowned slightly. She continued. "It looked like no one lived here." "I live here." "No," she said gently. "You stay here." The difference irritated him, not because it was rude, because it was true. Noor's care did not announce itself. It appeared quietly. Fresh flowers near the window, never too bright, never arranged for display alone. Books placed where hands might reach them, not where designers thought they looked impressive. A repaired drawer in the kitchen that had stuck for months. A blanket left near the balcony doors after Noor noticed Dorian stood there late at night, still in his suit, staring at the city with tired eyes. She never said, "I did this for you." That made it harder for him to dismiss. One morning, Dorian came into the kitchen and found his coffee already made. He paused. Noor was by the sink, rinsing a cup. "You made coffee?" "I made coffee," she said. There was enough for two. He looked at the cup waiting beside the machine. "You remembered how I take it." It is not difficult to notice things. The answer unsettled him. People notice Dorian all the time, but usually for reasons tied to power. His name, his money, his position, his effect on a room. Norah noticed smaller truths. When he skipped meals, when his shoulders tightened after calls with the board, when he pretended not to care after speaking with his mother. She did not ask too many questions. She did not push herself into places he had closed. But somehow, without trying, she made the penthouse less empty. Dorian began coming home earlier, not every night, not enough to admit anything had changed, but enough to notice the difference between silence and peace. And Norah, without asking for credit, had brought peace into a place he had mistaken for success. The chair sat in a forgotten corner of the study, old brown leather, scratched wooden arms, one torn seam along the side. Dorian had kept it for years without knowing why. It did not match the room. It looked worn beside the clean lines and expensive shelves. More than once, decorators had suggested removing it. He always refused. One night, after a harsh board meeting, Dorian came home later than usual. His tie hung loose. His expression carried the kind of fatigue money could not soften. He expected the penthouse to be dark. Instead, he saw light under the study door. He stepped inside and stopped. Norah sat near the old chair with a small sewing kit, a cloth, and a jar of leather balm beside her. Her sleeves were rolled up. Her hair had slipped slightly from its pins. She looked focused, careful, completely at ease with the damaged thing before her. "What are you doing?" Dorian asked. Norah did not look startled. "Repairing the torn lining. That chair is worth nothing." She paused, then looked up. "Then why have you kept it?" Dorian had no answer. His gaze moved to the chair. It had belonged to his grandfather, the only man in his childhood who had laughed loudly, hugged freely, and made the Blackwell house feel less cold before everything changed. Norah touched the leather with care. "The frame is still strong," she said. "The damage is mostly neglect." Dorian stood silent. Norah returned to her work. For reasons he could not explain, watching her restore that chair felt more personal than it should have, like she had found something in his life he had left behind and treated it as if it still mattered. Norah worked slowly. She cleaned the leather first, then pressed the torn edge back into place with patient fingers. She did not rush. She did not force the material to hide its age. Dorian watched from the doorway. "You do this often?" he asked. "When something is worth saving. It looks old. It is old. That is not always a good thing." Norah glanced at him. New things are often easy to admire. Old things ask for patience. The words stayed in the room. Dorian walked closer, drawn in despite himself. "You think everything broken should be kept?" "No." She tied off a thread, then smoothed the seam. "Some things are broken because they were never cared for. Some things are broken because people used them and threw them aside. Some things are broken because time touched them. You have to know the difference." He looked at the chair again. "And this? This was loved once." Her answer was simple, but it struck something in him. Norah ran her fingers over the worn leather. "Some things are not valuable because they look perfect. They matter because someone loved them before they broke." Dorian looked away. He did not want her to see how deeply that sentence reached. For years, he had tried to polish everything damaged about his family, until no one could see the cracks. The hotel, the name, his mother's grief, his own fear of becoming like his father. Norah did not hide damage. She honored what survived it. That was different. And for the first time, Dorian wondered if strength did not mean looking untouched. Maybe strength meant being handled with care after life had left marks. After that night, Dorian began noticing Norah in ways he had not allowed himself before. Not her beauty alone, though he saw that too. The softer things, the way she listened before answering, the way she never filled silence with empty words, the way she treated the doorman with the same respect she gave investors, the way staff members relaxed when she entered a room. He noticed how the penthouse changed around her. Flowers stayed fresh. Books moved. Meals appeared when he forgot to eat. Never presented like service, only left where he would find them. The old chair returned to the study, restored but not made new. Its scars remained, yet somehow it looked stronger because of them. Dorian sat in it one evening, after Norah had gone to her room. For the first time in years, the study felt less like a place where he performed control, and more like a place where he could rest. That unsettled him. Norah had entered his life as a solution, a contract, a temporary wife. But she had begun touching parts of his world no contract had mentioned. His routines, his home, his conscience. Dorian did not know what to call the shift inside him, so he called it curiosity. That felt safer than care. But when Norah passed the study door that night and asked, "Do you need anything?" he almost answered honestly, "Yes, stay." Instead, he said, "No." She nodded and walked away. Dorian watched the empty doorway longer than he should have. That was the moment everything started changing. Until Verina came back. Verina Ashcroft returned on a rainy Thursday afternoon. She did not call first. She did not request a meeting. She arrived at the Blackwell Grand Hotel like someone returning to property she still believed belonged to her. The lobby changed when she entered, not because she made noise, because Verina knew how to make silence serve her. Her coat was cream, her heels sharp, her hair styled with careful ease. The receptionist recognized her at once. So did the security guard near the marble column. For 3 years, Verina had walked beside Dorian Blackwell at galas, charity dinners, and hotel openings. Her face had appeared beside his in society pages. To many people, she had been the expected future Mrs. Blackwell, until Isolde stopped it. Until Dorian married Norah. Verina smiled at the front desk. "I'm here to see Dorian." The receptionist hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" Verina's smile remained. "Tell him it's Verina." That name traveled quickly. Within minutes, Dorian stepped out of the private elevator. He stopped when he saw her. For a brief second, the old life returned to his face. Shock, memory, pride, maybe even longing. Verina saw it. She walked toward him slowly. "Hello, Dorian." He looked at her like a man facing a door he thought had closed. "Verina, I heard you were married." His jaw tightened. "Yes." She looked around the hotel lobby, then back at him. To her? The words were soft, but they carried a blade. Dorian should have corrected her. He should have ended the conversation there. Instead, he said, "This is not the place." Verina's eyes warmed with victory. "Then take me somewhere private." And he did. Dorian brought Verina to a quiet lounge reserved for senior guests. He told himself it was only courtesy. That lie lasted less than 1 minute. Verina sat across from him, hands folded, eyes lowered at first. She had always known how to perform regret without looking weak. "I made mistakes," she said. Dorian stayed still. "You left because your mother made it clear I was not wanted. She had concerns. She hated me." Dorian looked away. Verina leaned forward slightly. "I loved you, Dorian. I was hurt. I felt judged before I was heard." Her voice trembled at the right places. Not too much. Never enough to look desperate. Just enough to pull at the part of him that still wanted to feel chosen. "You should not be here," he said. "I know. Then why come?" She looked at him with wet eyes. "Because I kept asking myself one question. Did you marry her because you loved her, or because you wanted to punish me?" The question struck his pride. "Norah has nothing to do with punishing you." Verina tilted her head. "Norah." She said the name like it tasted strange. "I'm sure she's kind." Dorian's expression tightened. "She is." Verina reached across the table and touched his hand. "Kind women are safe, but safe is not always love." He looked down at her fingers. He should have moved his hand away. He did not. Verina noticed. "I know you, Dorian," she whispered. "I know the life you were built for. I know the rooms you belong in." Does she? That question did what Verina intended. It made Norah sound small. It made Dorian feel misunderstood. It made the old world feel familiar. And familiarity, in the wrong hands, becomes a trap. After that day, Verina began appearing everywhere. At first, it looked accidental. A charity committee meeting, a hotel art preview, a donor breakfast, a private fundraiser hosted in one of the Blackwell ballrooms. Each time she had a reason. Each reason sounded harmless. Norah noticed the pattern before Dorian admitted there was one. Verina never crossed obvious lines in public. She was too careful for that. She stood close enough to be noticed, but not close enough to be accused. She laughed at Dorian's old jokes. She called him by familiar names from their past. She touched his sleeve while speaking, then drew back with a small smile. People watched. People whispered. Noor heard enough. Didn't they date for years? I thought he married the quiet one. Maybe the marriage is only for show. Verina fed those whispers without saying anything directly. At a benefit dinner, she stood beside Dorian near the champagne table and adjusted his cufflink. A simple gesture, too intimate for a woman who claimed to be only an old friend. Dorian froze for half a second, but he let it happen. Across the room, Noor saw it. She stood beside a donor's wife, holding a glass of water she had barely touched. The woman beside her followed Noor's gaze and smiled with pity. That must be uncomfortable. Noor looked at her. Not for me. The woman blinked. Noor turned back toward the room. Inside, the words hurt. But outside, she remained composed. She had learned long ago that some people mistake visible pain for permission, so she gave them none. Still, the damage spread. Every public laugh between Dorian and Verina became a question Noor had to carry alone. Noor did not confront Dorian at first. She watched. That was what she did best. She watched Verina enter rooms and search for the most useful audience before speaking. She watched Dorian relax when Verina praised him. She watched his face shift when old memories came up, as if part of him still wanted to belong to the past. Noor told herself the marriage had terms. 1 year, public appearances, separate rooms, a clean ending. Dorian had never promised love, but he had promised respect. That was where the wound began. Respect would have told Verina to step back. Respect would have corrected the whispers. Respect would have protected Noor from being treated like a temporary detail in his life. Instead, Dorian let silence do the damage. One evening, Noor sat alone in the penthouse dining area, while Dorian took a call near the balcony doors. She heard Verina's name, not all the words. Enough. His tone was quieter with her, softer in a way Noor had not heard often. Noor lowered her eyes to the tea in front of her. Do you think silence means strength or weakness? Tell me in the comments. Because Noor's silence was not empty. It held questions. It held hurt. It held every answer Dorian refused to give. When he ended the call, he returned to the table as if nothing had happened. Noor looked up. Will she keep coming around? Dorian paused. She is part of certain social circles. That is not what I asked. His face tightened. Noor, do not make this bigger than it is. She nodded slowly. That answer told her enough. Dorian's greatest failure was not that Verina returned. It was that he allowed her to stay close. Every time she called, he answered. Every time she appeared, he listened. Every time she stepped too near, he let the moment pass without correction. He told himself he was being civil. He told himself the marriage with Noor had limits. He told himself Verina was emotional, wounded, and harmless. But excuses do not protect anyone. They only delay the truth. Noor began to withdraw in small ways. She stopped leaving coffee for him in the morning. The flowers near the window appeared less often. The books stayed where they were. The penthouse did not become cold at once, but its warmth started fading. Dorian noticed. He found Noor one evening in the study, closing her notebook as he entered. You have been quiet, he said. I have been clear. He frowned. About what? About watching you choose comfort over respect. The words landed hard. Dorian leaned against the desk. Verina and I have history. No, Noor said. History is what happened before me. What you allow now is a choice. He looked at her for a long moment. She is not a threat. Noor stood. To you, perhaps. She walked toward the door, then stopped. You do not have to love me, Dorian. But you do have to stop letting people treat me like I am easy to replace. He said nothing. That silence became his answer. Noor left the room. Dorian remained behind, surrounded by everything she had made warmer, while failing to understand that warmth leaves quietly before love does. The dinner was held at Isolde Blackwell's townhouse, a private place reserved for people she trusted or people she needed to study closely. That night, both kinds of people filled the room. Investors arrived in dark suits and careful smiles. Their wives wore diamonds that caught the light with every small movement. Senior advisors spoke in low voices near the fireplace. Board members stood near the dining room entrance, watching Dorian like they were measuring more than his business sense. They were measuring his future. Dorian knew it. That was why he had been tense since afternoon. He checked his cufflinks twice. He reviewed the guest list 3 times. He barely touched the drink placed beside him. Norah noticed, but said nothing. She had learned that Dorian did not always welcome concern. Sometimes he treated kindness like pressure when it came from the wrong person. Still, she watched him from across the room. He looked polished. He always did. But beneath the calm face, she saw strain. His jaw tightened when a board member laughed too loudly. His eyes moved toward the door whenever someone entered. His hand brushed his phone as if waiting for news that might change the night. Isolde stood near the center of the room, dressed in black, composed as ever. This dinner was not social. It was a test. Everyone understood that without saying it. And Norah, standing in the middle of old wealth, private judgment, and quiet expectation, knew one thing clearly. By the end of the night, someone would be exposed. She just did not yet know it would be her heart. Norah had chosen a navy dress, simple, clean, soft at the sleeves, fitted with care, altered by her own hands until it held her shape without begging for attention. She wore no heavy diamonds, no loud designer piece, no borrowed confidence. Her hair was pinned low. Her earrings were small pearls that had belonged to her mother before illness made jewelry feel unnecessary. When she entered the dining room, a few guests turned. Some looked surprised. Some looked curious. A few looked disappointed that she gave them nothing obvious to mock. Norah felt every glance, but she did not let them guide her steps. She moved with calm grace, greeted Isolde first, then took her place beside Dorian. For one brief second, Dorian looked at her and forgot to speak. Norah saw it. So did Isolde. Dorian's eyes moved over the dress, not with possession, but with something softer. Recognition, perhaps, or confusion, like he had expected her to enter as his arrangement and found a woman instead. "You look," he began. Norah waited. He stopped himself. "Appropriate," he said. The word landed poorly. Norah smiled without warmth. How generous. Dorian's mouth tightened, but he did not answer. Across the room, Isolde's eyes narrowed slightly. She had heard enough to know when her son was afraid of his own feelings. Norah turned toward the table. If Dorian would not name what he saw, that was his failure, not hers. She had not come to be admired. She had come to stand, and no matter who tried to diminish her, she would leave with her dignity still in her own hands. Verina arrived late, not by accident. She entered after everyone else had settled, after the first round of drinks had been poured, after the room had found its rhythm. Timing was part of her talent. Her silver dress caught attention at once. The fabric moved like water under the lights. Her smile carried ease, but her eyes were already counting reactions. Dorian turned when he heard her name near the doorway. Norah saw the shift in him. Small, controlled, still there. Verina crossed the room with confidence, greeting investors by name, touching shoulders, laughing softly at private references Norah did not know. She made each person feel selected, important, included. By the time she reached Dorian, she had already reminded the room why she once belonged beside him. "Dorian," she said, warm enough for others to hear. "Verina." She leaned in and kissed the air near his cheek. Too familiar, too public. Norah stood beside him, calm and silent. Verina turned to her last. "Norah," she said, "how lovely to see you here." Here, the word was small. The meaning was not. It suggested Norah was visiting a place Verina had owned first. Norah met her gaze. "It is my husband's family dinner." The sentence was quiet, but clean. A pause followed. Verina smiled wider. "Of course." Then she turned back to Dorian, as if Norah had already been handled. Throughout dinner, Verina claimed space with practiced ease. She told stories from old charity trips, mentioned names Norah had never heard, recalled places Dorian had visited before their marriage. Each memory placed Norah outside the circle. Each laugh pushed Verina closer to the center, and Dorian let it continue. Dinner began with polite conversation and hidden judgment. The table was long, polished, and filled with people who knew how to insult without raising their voices. Every question sounded harmless until it reached Norah. "And how are you adjusting to this life, Mrs. Blackwell? Do you find public events tiring? Were you familiar with philanthropy before your marriage?" Norah answered each one with calm precision. "I am adjusting by listening. Most long events are tiring, but some are worth the time. I was familiar with service. Philanthropy is service with better lighting." A few people laughed before they could stop themselves. Isolde smiled into her glass. Verina did not. Dorian glanced at Norah, surprised again by how easily she held herself under pressure. But surprise was not defense. Surprise did not protect her when people tried to place her beneath them. Verina leaned forward after the main course. "Dorian used to say these dinners bored him," she said, smiling toward the investors. "He preferred late suppers downtown after everyone important had gone home." An older investor chuckled. "That sounds like him." Verina looked at Norah. "I suppose marriage changes a man." Norah rested her hand near her glass. "A good marriage should." The table quieted for half a second. Dorian lowered his eyes. Verina's smile hardened. The pressure in the room shifted. Norah could feel it. She had pushed back without raising her voice, and now everyone was waiting to see whether Dorian would stand beside his wife or retreat into comfort. He did neither. He simply changed the subject. That hurt more than an open insult, because once again, Norah stood alone in a room where her husband sat beside her. By the time dessert plates were being prepared, Norah felt the evening closing around her. She had kept her composure through every glance, every careful question, every private memory Verina offered like a jewel held up for inspection. Dorian had spoken well to investors. He had charmed the board. He had avoided conflict. But he had not protected her. That truth settled quietly inside Norah. A napkin slipped from the lap of an elderly guest beside her and fell near the edge of the table. Norah picked it up at once, more from habit than duty. "I'll have someone bring another," the guest said. "It's all right," Norah replied. "I'll return this one." She stepped away from the table before anyone stopped her. The hallway outside the dining room was quieter, lined with framed portraits and soft wall lamps. Norah moved toward the side table where fresh linens had been stacked for dinner service. Then she heard Verina's voice. "Tell me the truth, Dorian." Norah stopped. Dorian's voice followed, lower, guarded. "Verina, not here. No, here. Tonight. I need to know." Norah's hand closed around the napkin. Verina asked the question that would split the night in two. "What is she to you?" A pause, long enough for hope, short enough for fear. Then Dorian answered, "She's just a cleaner I married." Norah did not move. The words reached her before the pain did, and at the end of the hallway, Isolde Blackwell had heard them too. Dorian stood frozen in the hallway. For the first time that night, his perfect control failed him. Isolde Blackwell faced him with a calm expression, but her eyes held the kind of disappointment no son wanted to receive from his mother. "Say it again," she said. Dorian swallowed. "Mother, it was not meant that way." "Then say what you meant." Verina stood beside him, silent now. Her earlier confidence had begun to fade. She had expected Isolde to look at Norah with suspicion. Instead, Isolde looked at Dorian like he had failed a test he had been given many times before. Dorian glanced toward the dining room. Norah was already back at the table. Still, composed, wounded. That hurt him in a way he did not expect. If she had shouted, he might have defended himself. If she had cried, he might have apologized quickly and called it emotion. But her silence gave him nowhere to hide. Isolde stepped closer. "You called your wife a cleaner, as if honest work made her small." Dorian lowered his voice. "I made a mistake." "No," Isolde said. "A mistake is spilling wine. What you did was reveal what you have been carrying inside." His face tightened. Verina tried to speak. "Isolde, I think this has been misunderstood." Isolde turned her head slowly. "No. For once, everything is clear." That sentence cut through the hallway. Then Isolde looked back at her son. "You wanted proof of maturity. Tonight, you gave me proof of pride." Dorian said nothing. Because there was nothing left to say, Isolde walked back into the dining room. The room quieted before she spoke. That was her power. She did not need to demand attention. She carried enough authority for people to give it freely. Norah sat near the middle of the table, hands folded in her lap. Her face looked calm, but Isolde saw the pain beneath it. She saw the effort it took for Norah to stay seated, while her heart had every reason to leave. Dorian entered behind Isolde. Verina followed more slowly. Everyone noticed the change. Isolde lifted her glass, but she did not smile. Before dessert, she said, "I would like to honor the only person in this room who has shown real class tonight." The guests looked at one another. Some expected her to name an investor. Some expected a toast to the board. Norah did not move. Isolde turned toward her. Norah Blackwell entered this family with more grace than many people born into it. The room went still. Dorian's hand tightened at his side. Isolde continued, "She has been dismissed, underestimated, and measured by people who mistook wealth for worth, yet she has answered pride with patience. She has answered insult with dignity. She has carried herself with a strength this room should learn from." Norah's eyes lifted. For once, someone had spoken what she had never asked anyone to see. A few guests shifted in their chairs. Isolde's voice stayed steady. "Some people believe class is inherited. They are wrong. Class is revealed when you have power over someone and choose not to humiliate them." No one touched their glass. No one reached for dessert. The dinner had become a judgment, and Isolde was not finished. Isolde placed her glass on the table. Then she looked at every guest, one by one, until the room felt smaller. "My son called his wife a cleaner." A sharp silence followed. Norah's breath caught, but she did not look away. Dorian lowered his eyes. Isolde continued, "Let me correct him in front of the same people he wanted to impress." Her voice became firmer. "Honest work is not shameful. What is shameful is using a person's labor while looking down on their life." The words landed across the table with force. A few people looked down. Others sat stiffly, pretending the sentence had not found them too. Isolde turned slightly toward Norah. "This woman has served in rooms where people failed to thank her. She has worked before sunrise while others slept in comfort. She has carried responsibility without complaint. She has shown kindness without asking for reward." Norah blinked slowly. Her composure almost broke. Almost. Isolde softened her tone, but not her message. "Norah, you owe no one an apology for the work you have done. You owe no one shame for surviving with dignity. You have brought more honor into this family than the people who thought your title made you less." Verina's face tightened. Dorian looked at Norah, then really looked. Not as the woman he had married for convenience, not as the woman he had failed to defend, as the person he had wounded in public before the truth reached the table. Isolde faced the room again. "If anyone at this table has mistaken money for character, I suggest tonight becomes the night you learn the difference." No one argued. No one dared. Verina tried to recover. She had survived many rooms by controlling how people saw her. A gentle smile here, a careful tear there, a soft laugh at the right moment. She knew how to turn attention away from her intentions. But this time, the room had shifted beyond her reach. "Isolde," she said, rising slightly from her chair, "I think emotions are high." Nobody meant to insult Norah. Isolde turned to her. "Sit down, Verina." The command was quiet. That made it worse. Verina's face changed for half a second, just long enough for the mask to slip. Isolde saw it. So did others. "You returned to this family circle pretending to be wounded," Isolde said. "But you were not seeking peace. You were testing whether my son was still weak enough to let you erase his wife." Verina's lips parted. "That is unfair." "No," Isolde said. "Unfair is smiling across a dinner table at a woman you are trying to belittle. Unfair is touching another woman's husband in public, then acting innocent when people whisper. Unfair is using manners as a cover for cruelty." The room turned toward Verina. Every glance she had once enjoyed now pressed against her. Her beauty no longer protected her. Her polish no longer persuaded. Her silence no longer looked elegant. It looked exposed. Dorian looked at Verina too, but not with longing this time. With recognition. He saw the small games he had excused. the calculated closeness, the private questions, the way she made Noor seem out of place without ever saying it directly. Verina reached for her clutch. "This is beneath me," Isolde answered at once. "No, Verina. This is the first honest room you have stood in all night." Verina had no reply, and for once, the woman who always knew how to win a room had no room left to win. Then Isolde turned to Dorian. That was the moment the room had been waiting for. Verina had been exposed, but Dorian had allowed it. He had opened the door. He had failed to protect the woman who carried his name. Isolde's voice lowered. "You asked for control of this company." Dorian stood near the doorway, pale and still. "You wanted the board to trust your judgment. You wanted me to believe you were ready to lead thousands of people whose names you barely know." The words struck harder because they were true. Isolde stepped closer. "Tonight, you proved you are not ready." The room stayed silent. Even the investors who had questioned him earlier seemed uncomfortable now. This was no longer business. This was a mother, stripping away the image her son had hidden behind for years. "You cannot lead people you secretly look down on," Isolde said. "You cannot protect a legacy while humiliating the people who help hold it up, and you cannot call yourself a husband while making your wife feel disposable." Dorian looked at Noor. Her face remained calm, but her eyes carried pain he had no right to ask her to soften. "I am sorry," he said quietly. Noor did not answer. Isolde did. "Do not offer a sentence because the room heard you. Become a man who would never say it when no one is listening." That ended him. Not publicly, not loudly, but deeply. For the first time, Dorian understood the full weight of what he had done. He had not only insulted Noor, he had revealed himself. Noor rose from her chair. Every eye followed her. She placed her napkin beside her plate with care. Then she walked out before dessert was served. Dorian moved as if to follow. Isolde stopped him with one look. "Let her leave with the dignity you failed to protect." Noor reached the foyer before anyone followed her. The townhouse behind her still held the silence of a room that had seen too much truth. No voices rose. No chairs scraped. No one laughed anymore. For once, the rich had no graceful way to continue. Noor stood near the small marble table beside the front door. A silver tray sat on top of it, holding keys, invitation cards, and a vase of white flowers trimmed too neatly to look alive. She looked down at her left hand. The ring caught the light. It had always felt too heavy, not because of the diamond, because of what it had asked her to carry. A wife in public, a stranger in private, a symbol of character for a man who had not learned how to honor her. Noor turned the ring slowly around her finger. She remembered the day she signed the agreement. She remembered asking Dorian about respect. She remembered his quick answer, "You will have it." At the time, she had wanted to believe him. Now she understood the truth. Some promises sound strong because no one has tested them yet. She slipped the ring off. Her hand felt bare at once, but lighter. She placed it on the marble table with care. No anger, no noise, no dramatic gesture, just a quiet ending. The front door was a few steps away. Freedom was close. But behind her, she heard Dorian's voice. "Noor." She closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she opened them and turned. Dorian stood at the edge of the foyer. He looked different from the man who had entered dinner beside her. His face had lost its polished certainty. His tie sat slightly loose. His eyes carried panic he was trying and failing to control. Noor had never seen him look so human. That almost hurt more, because part of her had wanted to see this before the damage. "Please," he said, "don't leave like this." Noor looked at him calmly. "How should I leave?" He stepped closer, then stopped when she did not move toward him. "I was angry. Verina was pushing me. I said something careless." "Careless," Noor repeated. The word did not sound like enough. Dorian ran a hand over his mouth. "I know it was wrong." "No," she said softly. "You know it was heard." That struck him. He looked toward the table where the ring rested. "Noor, I never wanted to hurt you, but you were willing to reduce me. I was trying to end the conversation. You ended more than that." The foyer became still. Noor did not raise her voice. That made every sentence heavier. Dorian looked like he wanted anger, because anger would give him something to fight. Her calm gave him nothing, except the truth. He swallowed. Tell me how to fix this. Nora's eyes softened for one painful second. You should have thought about that before you made me something to explain away. Dorian looked at her with desperation now. She means nothing to me. Nora almost smiled, but there was no joy in it. Then why did her opinion matter enough to cost me mine? He had no answer. The silence stretched between them, wide and final. Nora looked past him toward the dining room. She thought of every person who had watched Isolde defend her. She thought of every glance, every whisper, every polite insult she had endured, because she believed Dorian would at least protect the promise he made. Respect. That was all she had asked for. Not love, not devotion, not a fairy tale marriage. Just respect. Dorian took a breath. I did not mean it. Noor looked back at him. Yes, you did. His face tightened, as if the words had struck him. She continued, quiet and steady. You were honest when you thought only she was listening. Dorian went still. There it was, the one sentence he could not argue with, because Noor knew the difference between a lie told under pressure and a truth spoken for approval. He had wanted Verina to see Noor as temporary. He had wanted to feel above the marriage he had chosen. He had wanted to separate himself from the woman standing beside him in public, and Noor had heard him do it. I was a cleaner you married, she said, but I was also a woman who believed your promise. His voice broke. Noor. She shook her head once. Do not say my name like it repairs anything. Noor turned back toward the door. Dorian moved, but stopped himself before reaching for her. Maybe some part of him finally understood that love, or anything close to it, could not be held by force. Noor, where will you go? She placed her hand on the door handle. Somewhere I am not treated like a secret shame. He flinched. The words were not cruel. They were exact. Behind them, footsteps approached, then stopped. Isolde stood near the hallway entrance, watching without interrupting. Her face held sorrow, but no surprise. Noor looked at her. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Isolde gave a small nod. Not permission. Respect. That was all Noor needed. She opened the door. Cool night air touched her face. The city waited beyond the steps, bright and indifferent. But Noor did not feel afraid. Her heart ached, but her spine stayed straight. She left without slamming the door, without crying in front of him, without begging to be chosen. That was what broke Dorian most. The silence, the dignity, the way she walked away as if she had already gathered every broken piece of herself and refused to leave even one behind for him. The door closed softly. Dorian stood in the foyer, staring at the ring on the marble table. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to lose someone who had never tried to own him. The penthouse felt large. The penthouse felt larger after Noor left. Not grander, not freer, larger in the worst way. Her room was clean, almost untouched, but the absence inside it felt heavy. The closet held empty hangers. The desk by the window had no notebook on it. The bed was made with the same care she gave everything, even when leaving. Dorian stood in the doorway and did not enter. He had once thought separate rooms kept the arrangement simple. Now that distance felt like proof of how little he had offered her. In the living room, the flowers near the window had begun to droop. The bowl of oranges on the kitchen island was almost empty. The blanket near the balcony doors was folded neatly over the chair, waiting for a man who had never thanked the woman who noticed he was cold. The old leather chair sat in the study, restored, steady, still marked by age, but no longer neglected. Dorian touched the armrest and remembered Noor's voice. Some things are not valuable because they look perfect. They matter because someone loved them before they broke. He sat down slowly. For the first time, he understood the difference between a furnished room and a home. Noor had not taken much when she left. A small bag, her sketchbook, her dignity, but somehow she had taken the warmth with her. Dorian looked around at everything money had bought. None of it comforted him, because the woman he had called just a cleaner had been the only person who made his life feel human. The hotel felt different too. At first, no one said anything to Dorian. That silence was worse than open judgment. The housekeepers lowered their eyes when he passed, not out of respect, but restraint. The front desk greeted him with careful politeness. The kitchen staff stopped laughing when he entered. Even the doormen, men who had always stood tall for him, now watched him with a quiet distance. Dorian noticed because Norah had taught him how to notice. Before her, he would have called it professionalism. Now he recognized pain. The staff knew, maybe not every detail, but enough. They knew Norah had left. They knew Isolde had defended her. They knew Dorian had humiliated a woman who had never harmed him. One morning, he entered the housekeeping office without warning. The room went still. A supervisor stood quickly. Mr. Blackwell. Dorian looked at the crowded schedule board, the names marked beside long shifts, the notes about missing supplies, the requests for extra hands that had been ignored for weeks. He had seen reports before. He had never stood where the work began. A young housekeeper moved a cart past him, eyes fixed on the floor. Dorian stepped aside. "Thank you," he said. She looked startled. The words felt small. Too late. Still, he meant them. He spent the next hour asking questions, not giving orders. He heard about overtime, short staffing, broken equipment, guests who insulted workers, and managers who cared more about ratings than people. By the end, Dorian understood something painful. Norah had not been an exception. She had been part of a workforce he had benefited from without truly seeing. That shame stayed with him. Dorian did not go after Norah with flowers. He tried once. He sent a large arrangement to the clinic where her mother received care. The next morning, his assistant told him Norah had donated the flowers to the nurses' station. That answer humbled him more than rejection. He sent a message next. No reply. He started a longer apology, deleted it, rewrote it, then deleted it again. Every version sounded like a man trying to explain pain away. Norah deserved better than polished regret. So Dorian stopped trying to reach her for his own relief. He sat with what he had done. That was harder. At night, he replayed the hallway. Verina's question, his answer, Norah's silence, Isolde's face, the ring on the marble table. He realized his deepest shame was not that the room had hurt him. It was that a private part of him had wanted Verina to approve of his cruelty. That truth made him sick. One evening, Isolde came to the penthouse. She found him in the study, sitting beside the restored chair. "I want to apologize to her," he said. Isolde removed her gloves slowly. "Then become someone whose apology has weight." He looked at her. "I am trying." "Do not chase Norah because you are lonely," Isolde said. "Do not chase her because the penthouse feels empty. Become a man who would never humiliate her again." Dorian lowered his head. For once, he did not defend himself. He listened. Dorian began with the people he had ignored. He called a staff meeting in the hotel ballroom. No cameras, no press, no board members positioned for praise, just the workers. Housekeepers, clerks, porters, kitchen staff, maintenance workers, security guards, and supervisors stood in cautious silence as Dorian walked to the front. He did not hide behind formal language. "I failed to honor the people who keep this hotel alive," he said. "I treated reports as numbers and service as something owed to me. That changes today." No one clapped. He did not expect them to. He apologized plainly, then announced immediate changes. Housekeeping wages would rise, overtime would be reviewed, and paid fairly. Staffing gaps would be fixed. Broken equipment would be replaced. Every department would have a direct channel to leadership without fear of punishment. Then he announced a design scholarship in Norah's father's name, created for students who had left school because family illness or money had blocked their path. He did not use Norah's name for attention. He did not tell the staff the scholarship was meant to win her back. It was not. It was the first honest thing he had done without asking for applause. Later, when the ballroom emptied, Dorian stood alone near the stage. The work ahead would not erase what he had said. It would not force Norah to forgive him. But growth had to begin somewhere. And for the first time, Dorian chose change without needing anyone to watch. Norah did not return to the hotel after she left Dorian. She returned to herself. At first, her new beginning was small. A rented studio above a quiet bakery in Brooklyn. One wide window. One long table. 2 second-hand chairs. A shelf filled with fabric samples, paint cards, old design books, and the sketchbook she had guarded for years. The room was not impressive to anyone who measured success by size, but to Norah, it felt like freedom. No one placed a schedule in her hand. No one told her where to stand. No one introduced her as a wife before they learned her name. Here, she was Norah Bellamy, designer, restorer, builder of warm spaces. She worked long hours. Some nights, she slept on the small sofa near the wall, with a coat over her shoulders and a pencil still in her hand. She took small jobs at first. A family dining room in Queens, a reading corner for an elderly widow, a boutique cafe that wanted history, not trend. Norah gave each project care. She asked clients what the room meant to them before asking what color they wanted. She listened to memories. She studied old furniture. She repaired what others wanted to replace. Her work carried the one thing luxury often lacked: feeling. Every space she touched looked lived in, loved, and honest. And slowly, people began to notice, not because she chased attention, because good work speaks, even when the worker stays quiet. Norah's first major review came from a client she almost refused. A small family hotel near the Hudson needed its lobby restored. The owners had little money and too much history. Their grandfather had opened the place decades earlier, but new hotels had buried them under glass towers and expensive branding. Norah visited the lobby and saw beyond the worn floors. She saw the hand-carved reception desk, the faded brass lamps, the old staircase with scratches from years of luggage, children, weddings, and reunions. The owners apologized for how tired everything looked. Norah smiled. "It does not look tired," she said. "It looks remembered." She restored the lobby without stripping away its soul. She cleaned the brass, repaired the desk, softened the lighting, and added seating that invited people to stay. She framed old guest postcards and placed them near the entrance. She turned the lobby from a waiting area into a family story. Within weeks, bookings rose. Guests began taking photos. A travel writer praised the hotel for feeling personal in a city full of cold luxury. The article mentioned Norah by name. After that, calls came faster. A brownstone owner, a private library, a small theater, another boutique hotel. Norah accepted what aligned with her values and declined what did not. She did not want projects that demanded empty beauty. She wanted spaces with memory. For the first time, she earned money through the gift she had hidden for years. Her mother cried when Norah showed her the article. "You see?" Her mother whispered. The world was late. It was not blind forever. Norah held her hand and smiled, but deep down, she knew the truth. She had not been waiting for the world to name her. She had named herself. Isolde Blackwell visited Norah's studio on a gray afternoon. She came without reporters, without assistants, without Dorian. Norah heard the knock while arranging fabric samples near the window. When she opened the door and saw Isolde standing there in a dark coat, she felt her chest tighten. "Mrs. Blackwell, may I come in?" Norah stepped aside. The studio was simple, but Isolde looked around as if she were entering somewhere important. Her gaze moved across the sketches, the restored chair frames, the paint cards, the pinned photographs, and the small table covered in notes. "You built this quickly," Isolde said. "No," Norah answered. "I carried it quietly for years. I only gave it a room." Isolde turned back to her. A faint smile touched her face. "That sounds like you." Norah did not offer tea at once. She did not rush to please. She waited. Isolde respected that. "I am not here for my son," she said. Norah's expression stayed still, but her fingers tightened slightly around the fabric sample in her hand. "I am here because you are gifted," Isolde continued, "and because the Blackwell Grand has a west wing that needs more than renovation. It needs someone who understands memory." Norah looked away. The hotel, the place where she had once entered through the staff door, the place where she had been invisible, the place tied to both her pain and her becoming. Isolde waited. She did not pressure. She did not flatter beyond truth. That silence made the offer harder to dismiss. Norah did not answer immediately. Instead, she asked for the project file. Isolde placed it on the table. Norah opened it and studied the pages with the care of a professional, not a woman being offered a favor. There were photos of the West Wing, old suites, worn corridors, a closed ballroom with covered chandeliers, a library that had not hosted guests in years. Noor saw potential at once, but she also saw risk. "If I accept," she said, "I will not be used as a symbol." Isolde nodded. "You will be hired as lead designer. I choose my team. Yes. I control the creative direction. Within budget, yes. No hidden approval from Dorian." Isolde's gaze sharpened, not with anger, but respect. "He will not interfere." Noor closed the file. "And if the board questions why a former housekeeper is leading a historic redesign?" Isolde answered without hesitation, "I will tell them the truth. You understand the hotel better than most people who have only admired it from the lobby." For the first time, Noor looked fully at her. There was no pity in Isolde's face, no guilt disguised as kindness, no attempt to buy forgiveness. Only recognition. That mattered. Noor had spent years working inside rooms designed by people who never cleaned them, never repaired them, never watched guests live in them. She knew how spaces failed people. She knew how they served people. And now someone with power was asking her to lead because of that knowledge, not despite her past. Because of it, Noor spent the night thinking. She walked through her studio after dark, touching the corners of her desk, the edge of her sketchbook, the fabric pinned to the wall. Everything in the room reminded her of how far she had come without the Blackwell name. That was why the decision mattered. Taking the project did not mean returning to Dorian. It did not mean forgiving the insult. It did not mean letting anyone rewrite her pain into a romantic lesson before she was ready. It meant something else. It meant walking through the front entrance of the Blackwell Grand as the woman she had become. The next morning, Noor called Isolde. "I'll take the project," she said. Isolde was quiet for a moment. "On your terms?" "On my terms." "Good." Noor arrived at the hotel 3 days later for the first site visit. She wore a tailored cream blouse, dark trousers, and carried her leather portfolio under one arm. No uniform, no cleaning cart, no lowered gaze. The doorman saw her first. Recognition spread across his face, followed by a smile. "Miss Bellamy," he said, opening the front door. Noor paused. Then she stepped inside. The lobby looked the same, but everything felt different. A few staff members turned. Some smiled. One housekeeper pressed a hand to her chest, proud before she could hide it. Noor nodded to them with warmth. Across the lobby, Dorian stood near the elevators. He saw her. She saw him, but she did not stop. This time, Noor Bellamy entered the Blackwell Grand through the front door, and no one in that room could pretend she did not belong. Working in the same building did not mean Noor and Dorian were close again. Noor made that clear from the first meeting. She entered the West Wing conference room with her portfolio, her notes, and her team beside her. Dorian sat across the table with 2 board members, a finance director, and Isolde near the head. For a brief moment, his eyes met hers. Noor gave him a professional nod. Nothing more. Dorian accepted it. That was the first difference she noticed. The old Dorian would have tried to claim the moment. He would have smiled in a way meant to soften her. He would have spoken first, as if his voice still had special access to her life. This Dorian stayed quiet. Noor opened the folder before her. "The West Wing should not become another luxury display," she said. "It already has history. Our job is to restore its soul, not erase it." A board member looked skeptical. Dorian did not interrupt. Noor continued, showing sketches of restored hallways, softened lighting, preserved moldings, and guest suites built around warmth rather than cold perfection. As she spoke, the room changed. People leaned in. Even those who doubted her began listening. Dorian watched without stepping into her space. He did not explain her ideas for her. He did not translate her words into corporate language. He let her own voice carry the room. When the meeting ended, Noor gathered her papers. Dorian stood, but kept his distance. "Good presentation," he said. Noor looked at him. "Thank you." No extra words. No old wound reopened. Just work. For Noor, that was enough. For Dorian, it was the beginning of learning how to stand near her without demanding forgiveness. Dorian's support came without announcement. That surprised Noor more than any apology would have. When her team requested access to old archives, the approval arrived before noon. When contractors questioned whether original fixtures were worth saving, the budget was adjusted without Noor needing to fight twice. When a hotel executive suggested replacing restored woodwork with cheaper material, Dorian sent a short note. Follow Norah's direction. No speech, no performance, no reminder that he had helped. Norah saw the notes because her project manager forwarded them. She read them once, saved them, and said nothing. But she noticed. One afternoon she walked through the West Wing with 2 assistants, marking areas where old wallpaper needed careful removal. A maintenance supervisor approached with concern. Miss Bellamy, this section may delay the schedule. We need executive approval for the extra hours. Before Norah answered, his phone buzzed. He checked it, blinked, and looked back up. Approval came through. Norah knew who had sent it. She turned toward the far end of the hallway. Dorian stood there speaking to a contractor, his back partly turned. He did not look her way. He did not wait to be thanked. That mattered. In the past, his help had often carried ownership. Now, it carried respect. Still, Norah guarded her heart. She had learned that change seen once was not enough. A man could act well for a day and return to pride the next. So she watched, not with bitterness, with wisdom. Dorian kept his distance. He greeted her in meetings, answered when spoken to, and never cornered her alone. The space he gave her became the first kindness she trusted. The conflict came during the second month. A senior investor named Warren Voss visited the West Wing with 2 advisors and a mood already set against Norah's plan. He walked through the unfinished corridor with his hands clasped behind his back, studying dust sheets, exposed wood, and sample boards with thinly veiled impatience. This feels sentimental, he said. Norah stood beside the old staircase, holding her project file. It feels human. Warren gave a short laugh. Hotels do not make money because they feel human. They make money because guests recognize prestige. Norah opened her file and showed him the preview testing results, early booking interest, and guest feedback from private concept releases. Guests are responding to warmth, history, and intimacy, she said. The market is tired of rooms that look impressive but feel empty. Warren barely glanced at the page. With respect, Miss Bellamy, you are new to this level of project. The hallway went still. Norah heard the meaning beneath the sentence. You were staff. You do not belong here. Her assistants shifted behind her. Dorian stood near the doorway, silent at first. Norah closed the file slowly. I am new to being listened to in rooms like this, she said. I am not new to understanding how rooms make people feel. Warren smiled. That is charming. But sentiment is not strategy. The words hung there. Everyone waited. In the past, Dorian might have smoothed it over. He might have protected the investor's pride and left Norah to absorb the insult. This time, he stepped forward. Dorian's voice was calm, but firm. Norah's preview concepts increased early booking interest by 30%. Warren turned. Dorian continued. Guest surveys show stronger emotional response to restored, historic details than to the modern luxury package you recommended. The investor's smile faded. No one is dismissing her effort. You did, Dorian said. You dismissed her expertise because you confused her background with a lack of vision. The hallway fell silent. Norah looked at him, startled despite herself. Dorian did not look at her for approval. He kept his focus on Warren. This hotel was built by workers, maintained by workers, and saved by people who understood service from the inside. Norah understands what guests feel when they enter a room because she has spent years noticing what most executives ignore. Warren's jaw tightened. Dorian took one step closer. So let me be clear. Norah Bellamy is the lead designer. Her plan is approved. Her team has authority. Anyone who cannot respect that can take their investment concerns to me directly. Norah's assistant stood taller. The maintenance supervisor looked down, hiding a small smile. Warren said nothing for several seconds. At last, he nodded stiffly. Understood. Dorian stepped aside, giving Norah the floor again. She looked at the investor. As I was saying, the staircase stays. This time, no one argued. Dorian moved back near the doorway, quiet again. Norah continued the tour, but something inside her had shifted. He had defended her without taking over. He had used his power to protect her place, not replace her voice. That was new. Norah did not forgive Dorian that day, but she noticed him, not the polished version, not the heir, the man trying to become better without demanding a reward for it. After the investor left, Norah stayed behind in the west wing to review lighting samples. Dust floated through the afternoon light. The old staircase stood behind her, scarred but strong, waiting for restoration. Dorian approached slowly. "May I speak?" Norah looked up. "You may." He stopped a respectful distance away. "I should have defended you like that before." "Yes," she said. No softening, no false comfort. Dorian accepted it. "I know." That answer stayed with her. No excuse followed. No explanation about pressure. No mention of Verina. No attempt to make his failures sound smaller. Norah looked back at the samples. "You did well today." His face changed slightly, as if the words meant more than he wanted to show. "Thank you." She picked up a brass fixture and studied the finish. "Do not do it for me. I am not good." He nodded. For a while, they stood in quiet peace. Not husband and wife, not lovers, not enemies. Two people standing among damaged things, deciding what deserved to be restored and what needed to be left behind. As Norah walked away, she glanced once at Dorian. He was not watching her like a man who wanted possession. He was watching the room, the workers, the project, the life around him. For the first time, Norah saw no performance, only effort. And effort, repeated long enough, was the first language of trust. The West Wing opened on a Friday evening. For the first time in years, the closed doors were unlocked, the old chandeliers were lit, and guests stepped into rooms that no longer felt forgotten. Norah stood near the entrance, with her hands folded before her. She had walked through this wing when dust covered the floors. She had studied every cracked molding, every worn banister, every tired corner. Now the space looked alive again. Not new, restored. That mattered to her. Soft lighting warmed the walls. Old photographs of the hotel's early years lined the corridor. The restored staircase stood at the center like a quiet witness. Guests moved slowly, touching railings, reading plaques, pausing in rooms that felt intimate instead of cold. Norah watched their reactions. Some smiled, some whispered. One elderly guest pressed her hand to her chest and said, "This feels like the hotel I remember." That was the best praise Norah received all night. Across the room, Dorian stood with investors, but his attention kept returning to her. Not with ownership, not with pride that treated her like his achievement. He looked at her like someone witnessing a truth he should have seen much earlier. Isolde approached Norah with a glass of water. "You did more than restore the wing," she said. Norah looked around. "I only listened to what was already here." Isolde smiled. "That is why it works." For one rare moment, Norah allowed herself to breathe. The night was not about Dorian. It was not about the past. It was about the woman she had become after everyone thought they knew her place. The announcement came before the ribbon was cut. A senior board member stepped onto the small platform near the staircase and thanked the investors, staff, planners, and restoration teams. Norah stood among her designers, expecting a brief mention. Instead, Isolde took the microphone. The room quieted at once. This project succeeded because one woman understood what many of us forgot, Isolde said. A hotel is not loved because it is expensive. It is loved because people feel seen inside it. Norah's eyes lifted. Isolde turned toward her. The West Wing was restored under the creative leadership of Norah Bellamy Blackwell. A hush moved through the room. Not confusion, recognition. Behind Isolde, the project plaque was revealed. Designed by Norah Bellamy Blackwell. Norah stared at the name. She had argued with herself for days over whether to remove Blackwell. That name carried pain. It also carried the place where she had been underestimated, tested, and finally seen. Isolde had asked her to leave it, not for Dorian, for every person who thought the name belonged only to those born into power. Applause rose. At first, Norah stayed still. Then her team began clapping. The housekeepers near the back joined. The front desk staff smiled openly. Even the kitchen staff, who had slipped in for the ceremony, applauded with pride. Norah stepped forward. She did not cry. She did not lower her head. She accepted the honor, like a woman who had earned every part of it. Dorian applauded too, but he did not step beside her. He let the moment belong to her alone. That choice said more than any speech he might have given. Verina arrived after the applause. Of course she did. She entered through the main doors, in a white dress, uninvited, smiling as if the night had been waiting for her. Her timing was too precise to be accidental. She had waited until the room celebrated Norah, then walked in to disturb the moment. Several guests turned. Whispers started near the champagne table. Verina moved through them with the same polished confidence she had always used, but this time, the room did not welcome her the same way. People watched with caution. Some remembered Isolde's words from the dinner. Others knew enough to understand trouble had arrived wearing perfume and pearls. Norah saw her from near the balcony doors. Her first feeling was not fear, it was tiredness. Some people returned, not because they had power, but because they could not accept losing it. Verina approached with a soft smile. "Norah," she said, "what a transformation." Norah looked at her steadily. "Thank you." Verina's eyes moved around the restored wing, from cleaning rooms to designing them. Quite the story. The insult was wrapped in praise, but Norah heard it clearly. So did the woman standing nearby, who quietly stepped away. Norah did not flinch. "I have always understood rooms," she said. "People were slower to understand me." Verina's smile tightened. Across the room, Dorian noticed the exchange. His body shifted, as if he wanted to move at once, but he stopped himself. This was Norah's moment. He would not rush in to perform protection. He waited, but he watched closely, because this time, if Verina crossed the line, he would not leave Norah standing alone. Verina leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Do you enjoy this performance? The humble woman everyone claps for?" Norah's face stayed calm. "I enjoy my work being respected." Verina gave a small laugh. "Respect is fragile in rooms like this. People forget quickly." "No," Norah said. "People reveal themselves quickly." That answer struck harder than Verina expected. Her eyes cooled. "You should be careful." Dorian's guilt might look like love for a while, but guilt fades. Norah looked at her for a long moment. There was a time those words would have hurt more. A time Norah might have wondered if Dorian's change was only shame dressed as devotion. But months of watching him act without asking for reward had taught her something. She did not need Verina to define what she had seen. "I am not here because of Dorian's guilt," Norah said. "I am here because of my skill." Verina's mouth tightened. Before she could answer, Dorian stepped beside Norah, not in front of her, beside her. That mattered. Verina turned to him, relief flashing in her eyes, as if she still expected old loyalty. "Dorian," she said, "I was only congratulating her." "No," he said. "You were doing what you have always done, hiding insult inside elegance." The nearby conversations faded. Verina's face stiffened. "That is unfair." Dorian's voice stayed calm. "What was unfair was letting you treat Norah like she had to defend her right to exist in my life." Norah looked at him. For once, he did not speak to impress the room. He spoke because the truth had waited long enough. Dorian faced Verina, but his words reached everyone close enough to hear. "Norah was never beneath this family," he said. "I was beneath the man I should have been when I let anyone treat her that way." The room went still. Verina's eyes flashed with anger. "You are saying this because everyone is watching." "No," Dorian said. "I failed because I cared who was watching. I am saying this because I should have said it when no one was." Norah's breath caught. That was the first time he had named the real wound, without forcing her to explain it. Dorian turned slightly toward her, but kept respectful distance. "I called you something small because I was small. I let fear, pride, and old approval speak for me. You deserved honor before love. I gave you neither when it mattered." Norah did not answer. She could not. Not yet. Dorian looked back at Verina. "You do not get to use her past as a weapon. Her work built this night. Her character saved what my money could only renovate. If you cannot respect that, you should leave." Verina looked around. No one stepped forward to defend her. No one laughed. No one softened the moment for her. For the first time, the room gave Norah the dignity Verina had tried to steal. Verina left without another word. Dorian did not follow. He remained beside Norah, quiet, waiting for nothing. Norah looked at the plaque again. Designed by Norah Bellamy Blackwell. This time, the name did not feel like a wound. It felt like proof. Later that night, Norah stepped onto the balcony alone. The gala continued behind her. Soft music, quiet laughter, glasses touching, people praising the West Wing as if they had always believed in her. But Norah needed air. The city stretched beneath her, bright and restless. For a moment, she rested both hands on the railing and let the night settle around her. She had won something tonight. Not Dorian, not approval. Herself. The woman who once entered the hotel through the staff door had returned through the front entrance. The woman people dismissed now had her name on the walls. Behind her, the balcony door opened. Dorian stepped out, but stayed near the doorway. "I can leave," he said. Norah did not turn at once. "No, stay there." He obeyed. That mattered. For months, Dorian had learned that love did not mean closing distance before trust allowed it. So he waited. Norah looked out over Manhattan. "This city looks softer from up here," she said. Dorian followed her gaze. "It does, but it is not softer," she added. "You are only far enough away from the noise." He understood the meaning beneath it. Distance had made some things easier to face. Pain, pride, the truth between them. For a while, neither spoke. This time, silence did not punish them. It gave them room. Dorian took one careful breath. "I owe you an apology without excuses." Norah stayed facing the city. He continued, "I humiliated you because I wanted to protect my image. I let Verina's opinion matter when yours should have mattered more. I treated your patience like permission." Norah closed her eyes briefly. He did not rush. "I told myself our marriage was an arrangement, so I did not have to honor the feelings growing inside it. That was cowardice." She turned slightly then. Dorian's voice lowered. "You asked me for respect before you signed that agreement. I promised it too easily because I did not understand its cost. Respect is not a word. It is protection. It is loyalty. It is how a man speaks about you when you are not in the room." Norah looked at him fully. He held her gaze, but did not step closer. "I failed you there. I failed you when it mattered most." Her face softened, but she stayed guarded. "You cannot repair that with one speech." "I know." "Good." He nodded once. "I am not asking you to forget. I am not asking you to make my guilt lighter. I only wanted to say the truth without dressing it up." Norah studied him. For the first time, his apology did not feel like a request. It felt like accountability. Norah looked back toward the city. "I loved you quietly," she said. Dorian went still. "I know I should not have. At least not then. But I did. I loved the parts of you that showed up when you forgot to perform, the tired man by the window, the son who still missed his grandfather, the man who almost smiled when I changed a room." Her voice stayed steady, but emotion sat beneath it. "I thought if I stayed kind, you would learn to see me." Dorian lowered his eyes. "You should never have had to earn basic respect." "No," she said. "I shouldn't have." The answer was simple. It carried everything. Dorian accepted it. Norah turned back to him. "I see that you have changed in some ways. I saw how you treated the staff. I saw the scholarship. I saw what you did with Warren. I saw tonight." He listened without interrupting. "But change is not a moment, Dorian. It is a pattern. I understand. I am not promising you my heart tonight. I would not ask for it." She nodded slowly. "But I am no longer closing the door." His breath caught. Norah saw it, but she did not smile yet. "This is not forgiveness. Not all of it. It is more than I deserve." "Yes," she said softly. "It is." The night air moved gently between them. Dorian remained where he was, giving Norah the choice. That choice mattered more than any diamond, any public defense, any apology spoken beneath city lights. Norah looked down at his hand. Months ago, that hand had placed a contract before her. Later, it had failed to protect her. Tonight, it had not reached for her until invited. That difference spoke. Slowly, Norah stepped closer. Dorian did not move. She lifted her hand and placed it in his. His fingers closed around hers with care, not possession. Norah felt the warmth of his palm and the caution in his touch. He held her like someone who understood trust was not property. It was something living, something that needed patience. Neither of them spoke at first. Words would have made the moment smaller. Inside the ballroom, guests continued celebrating. Outside, Norah and Dorian stood in the quiet space between what broke and what might heal. Dorian looked at their joined hands. "I will keep earning this," he said. Norah's eyes stayed on the city. "You will have to, I know." At last, she looked at him. "Do not become better only because you lost me." His answer came without hesitation. "I became better because losing you showed me who I had become." Norah held his gaze. This time, she believed him enough to stay, not forever, not fully, but for this moment. That was a beginning. Love did not return to Norah and Dorian as a grand promise. It returned slowly, through respect, through restraint, through choices made when no one clapped. Dorian learned that money could open doors, but it could not make a man worthy of entering someone's heart. Norah learned that forgiveness did not mean forgetting pain. It meant deciding whether the person who caused it had grown enough to never repeat it. Their story was not about a cleaner becoming worthy of a billionaire. She had always been worthy. It was about a billionaire learning that wealth without character is empty, and love without respect becomes pain. Norah's work had never made her small. Dorian's pride had, and when he finally understood that, he began the long road back to becoming someone safe for her heart. So tell me in the comments, would you forgive him, or walk away for good? And if this story touched you, like the video, share it with someone who needs this lesson, and subscribe to Love Tales with Mr. Easton for more stories about love, dignity, and second chances.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for choosing stories that ask more of you. The next story will be waiting.